Hi, yes, I'm awake. I'm awake. Oh, holy moly. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sleep Week. I'm just going back to bed, guys. Sorry, I've decided to cancel stream. Last second cancel. I'm out. Peace. Oh my goodness. What is up, guys? So, I don't know if this qualifies, because I don't really know how it works practically, and my brain isn't fully here yet. But I'm going to try and dip my toes into the incredible realm of first world problems, okay? You ready for this? So for those of you not aware, man, I'm trying to get some damn music going here. It's not working. In fact, what the hell is this? This is literally the wrong playlist. Oh, that's why. Duh. There we go. There we go. So, for those of you not aware, it was GDQ last week. I'm sorry, one moment. And that was awesome. What I was actually planning on doing last week was I was going to be like, all right, cool. You know, it's GDQ. I can watch speedruns kind of idly with part of my attention, like on the phone, for example, and just have the phone like right here and get some work done, right? And I was actually, you know what? I was going to do something almost unheard of for me, and this is probably going to sound like a joke, but it's not a joke. I was going to go ahead and take a day off, and I was just going to relax, work on something that was just for me, or play with something, I shouldn't use the word work, that's just for me, you know, something just for my own sake. That was the goal. And if that sounds stupid, I don't take days off, I work 7 days a week. So, especially with all the stuff I have to do, I'm still got a lore run coming up next week, you know. So last Monday, I had to go file some paperwork, and I had to do this, and I had to do this as quickly as possible, so I'm like, alright, whatever. So I arrive at the building, and I'm outside, right? And because of some scheduling snafus on their behalf, whoops, hang on. Why is it so loud? There we go. Because of some scheduling snafus, basically, there was literally a line to get in, okay? A line that... That's weird. A line going out into the parking lot to get into the building. Now, it only took me like 10 or so minutes to get in, but on this particular morning while I was out there, it was below freezing. I forget the exact temperature. And it was raining. Now, and oh, of course, I was also in a massive throng of people who were all very unhappy and all trying to get inside. And is this whole messed up situation because basically the fact that people were so eager to get inside kind of made it slower for people to get inside, and then, you know, you had to get the coats off and all that stuff. So, pretty unpleasant, right? You might be thinking, why are you bringing this up, Lore? Well, I then spent the next 2.5 days...
Oh, welcome. Pay close attention. Hopefully you'll learn something.
Getting a donation from Lord of Mordor. What the hell, man? I spent the next 2.5 days solid coughing. I'm not joking. I technically did sleep during that 2.5 days because every now and again I would actually pass out from sheer exhaustion, but then I would cough myself back awake. After about 2.5 days, and I say 2.5 because it was the middle of the night when the coughing finally started to subside, and I got to the point where I could actually get some kind of rest. I spent the next day after that feeling like someone had worked me over with a baseball bat. I was incredibly sore. I was barely capable of thinking straight. I was literally lying here in my chair, just, oh my god, kill me. Talking hurt. Breathing too hard hurt. Blowing my nose hurt. It was fun. So what I'm trying to say is that I didn't really get a lot of work done in the last week, and it wasn't because of GDQ. And I didn't really get a day off last week, and it wasn't because of GDQ. Now, you could argue that I did get my day off because, you know, I had days where I didn't work, but I don't know, in my book, unless it's a day where I'm actually spending it relaxing or recouping or whatever, you know, a day that I don't spend dying horribly, I don't really call that a day off, per se. Anyways. Oh yeah, by the way, fun little fact, that cough I got, my mom also got it. And you might be like, oh, that's strange. That's normal. Of course, your family member got it. My mom lives literally on the other side of the country from me. I also know people in other states who had the same cough last week. Just, I gotta admit, given how many people have this cough across the country right now, I feel bad for those attendees at GDQ because they're probably gonna pass that around a little bit. I hope not, because it sucked. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Anyways, sorry. Thank you, Lord of Mordor, for the donation. You suck. Let me know what you'd like to put that towards, please, when you get a chance. Thank you for the donation. I got a thing that says Progue just subscribed, but I didn't actually hear any proper notification on that one. Like, I saw a text notification, but I didn't get anything here. Elder Scrolls. Okay, thank you. Whoops, wrong button. So, really quick, one other thing I want to talk about before we actually get on with it. Oh, there it is. So, GDQ. Let's go ahead and talk about GDQ really quick. That was awesome. That's a good point, actually. The Elder Scrolls lore run is met. Ah! I'm not doing it. My throat is still not quite recovering. I still spent a decent amount of time last night coughing. But, fear. There we go. And thank you very much, Zed, and Progue, for your continued support. I very much appreciate it, especially right now. Anyways, so GDQ was awesome. We're still kind of in the rambling section here. This isn't really a topic. I guess I could make it a topic. So before we talk about GDQ, I'll make it a proper topic. I've already been rambling for like 8 minutes. I do have one other rambling thing to talk about, which isn't really newsworthy, so it's not really a topic. This actually happened a little over a week and a half ago, before GDQ even started. There was a gentleman who does a lot of experimental YouTube videos, which, whatever. He uploaded 10 hours of personally generated white noise. He'd actually generated it himself. And that white noise video on YouTube generated 4 separate copy-wrong flags on it. Gets better. He was actually asked to participate on a video for his workplace, and the production team asked him, you know, if they could use his music for this project that he worked on. He said, of course. About a month later, YouTube generated a copyright claim against the video that he was uploading for him. Now, YouTube actually responded to this situation with a statement which I wanted to share with you guys. And I quote, YouTube's Content ID system allows rights holders a way to claim content at scale by finding matches to content they submit to us and giving them an automated way to identify, block, and even make money from uploads of their content. We rely on copyright holders to only claim content they truly own. The accuracy of our matching system can only ever be as good as the accuracy of what copyright holders submit. We have review teams that work to catch and prevent inaccurate claims, take action against copyright holders who knowingly or repeatedly cause errors, and we offer a robust dispute process who believe their video was claimed in error. Not our problem. Jesus Christ. I've actually had a couple new copyright claims myself. Just the usual monetization claim ones. For my Babylon 5 videos. You know, the ones that involve me sitting in front of a screen talking with no music playing. I don't know who that is, Prog, so I'm going to say no. Anyways, so let's go ahead and talk about GDQ. I'll go ahead and make a timestamp for this. Because there are a couple things to talk about GDQ here. First and foremost, I've been following GDQ. Oh, I am aware of that. Requery, then. I don't care, is the nicest way I could possibly put that. Alright, current topic. Hang on. There. So, I've been following the Games Done Quick stuff from about 2010. And, there's been some, there's been some ups, there's been some downs. I forget the exact years. I was talking about this, there's some years that were like, eh. And then there's some years that were like, yeah, In general, SGDQ tends to be a little higher quality than AGDQ in my opinion, but I'm not going to go to the reasons for that. Good stuff, right? And of course, they support a charity that I actually give a damn about and support myself. One of the very few charities that I actually support. Now, what I want to talk about, first of all, before we get anything else, I want to talk about the negative quote-unquote stuff. And I'm putting that in quote-unquotes because it is my opinion that GDQ was awesome this year. I know it's awesome games done quick, but with all in total sincerity, this was one of the best AGDQs I've seen in a long time. Like, it just across the board. There were a lot of really good runs. Most of the runs were at least acceptable, and the number of runs which were boring or disinteresting was very small. There was only, like, I think 3 or so different donation incentives which weren't met. Like the Breath of the Wild one he put on the last minute. Of course, that wasn't going to get met. $250,000 in 3 hours. I don't even know what he was thinking. But overall, the level of quality was just very high. And I'm like, oh my god, this is great. I jotted down a couple of my favorite runs just to share with you guys. The Skyrim run was fantastic. I loved the Skyrim run. I was laughing that whole time. The Baldur's Gate 2 run, which was especially cathartic for me, given the fact that I've played Baldur's Gate 2, and it was very well presented. Arabian Nights. So the Arabian Nights run was very funny in general, but the other reason why Arabian Nights was so awesome for me was because that was one of those nights where I couldn't sleep. Remember? Cough. So I'm just laying there in bed, miserable, and I pull up the phone like, and I just turn on GDQ, and it happened to be like right at the beginning of the Arabian Nights run, and I needed that at that moment. Speaking of which, right after that was also the EnviroBear run, which was fantastic. The Mario and Luigi run for the GBA. There were a lot of good runs, but these are the ones I jotted down as the ones that were really stand out, just from memory for me. fear. Thank you very much, Rosulia, for your continued support. To the cave, to the cave. The special mention does have to go to the Bloodborne run, because I don't like Bloodborne at all. In fact, I actually had to, at a certain point, basically just stop watching Bloodborne and just listen to it, because I really don't like Bloodborne. But the guy doing Bloodborne was one of the best presenters, single individual presenters of the entire marathon. He was fantastic. It's hard to even properly describe how good this guy was. He is what I would aspire to be if I was to ever start speedrunning, more commonly. There we go. Oh no, not the spiders. I was there for the spiders. No, Bloodborne's just gross and awful and terrible. Sorry. I mean, it's a great game, I'm sure, but that's the kind of game that will legitimately depress me. It's one of the reasons I don't want to ever do a rumination on it. Anyways. So, getting back to my point. Sorry, I'm a little bit rambly and roamy today because I'm still really exhausted. I'm still having trouble breathing properly. Bear with me. I didn't like Dark Souls. What are you talking about? I don't like Dark Souls. 1, 2, or 3. So... Hey, it's the STL Low Run music. One of the... Sorry. God, I'm really out of it. One of the things I want to bring up is something that made me laugh a little bit. And that's why I wanted to start with that idea of, I thought it was one of the best AGDQs we've had in a while. Oh, that's another thing, I'm sorry. Another definite thing that deserves praise, in my opinion, is the way they were handling the interviews and, for lack of a better way to put it, the skits they kept doing. Obviously, they kept doing skits with regards to scent. That's not exactly new. But they also were doing like just funny little sketches or skits or whatever with regards to the team in general, with the interviews and with the transitions and the... It was awesome. And it actually made me legitimately laugh more than once. I like that. So the general presentation value and enjoyment value was a significant step up this year. I really hope SGDQ managed to be just as enjoyable. Once again, getting back to my original point. So... As usual, throughout the week, I like to trawl news sites, usually geek news sites, also some other things, like economic sites and whatnot. As you might imagine, just about everyone was reporting on GDQ because it's a very large, very well-known event. My reason for bringing this up is that a huge number of them reporting about how disastrous this year's GDQ was, and about how many people were upset at this year's GDQ. And about how awful this is getting, and maybe it's getting to the point where GDQ should start, thinking about having the plug pulled or winding down or whatever. Now, decided to do a little digging onto that one, because I'm like, okay, this has gotta be clickbait, right? So, there's 3 major thrusts of the complaints. And I'm going to try and destroy all 3 of these as best as I can. Remember, I'm really tired and having trouble concentrating, so please forgive me. It's really hard, by the way, to do your job when you're really tired and, like, foggy-headed, when your job is almost universally using your head. Anyways, what was I saying? First point, the chat. So for those of you not aware, they decided to make the chat sub-only this year. Now, my reaction to that was basically shrug. Okay, whatever. It's an attempt to try and make more people sub to the chat, and again, whatever. My basic reaction to that is shrug. It didn't stop the chat from being a nice big mess of memes and stupidity. It didn't really make anything particularly better. I actually made it a point to check the chat periodically throughout the week, and yep, it was still a mess. And yet, it's actually silly how many people I have seen in the last week complain about the fact that they had sub-only mode in the chat. Now, there was a specific channel which decided to restream GDQ. This is actually funny because it's kind of what we do here. Specifically so that people could go ahead and chat without, you know, having to sub in order to talk about it. And the funny thing is, most of those were... I'm trying to think how to phrase this. I'm sorry. I am, again, I apologize. I'm really out of it. A couple of those had issues with Twitch going after some of those restreams. And I want to make this clear because this is all stated intent, of course, but the reason for going after those restreams was not because they were restreaming. I mean, there's tons of channels that restream. Again, we actually restreamed. And it's not over the fact that they were a non-sub-only chat. It was the fact that some of those chats had become sufficiently toxic to the point that they went ahead and just shut it down. Now, call me a weirdo, but I'm with Twitch on that one. I'm sorry. Like, if I'm all about player choice and freedom of choice and all that, but I cannot possibly imagine how important it is to people with the idea that you really, really want to spam emotes or stupid jokes or memes or actually disgusting stuff during some of the runs, right? I mean, when I want to stress this for a moment. I know some of you know me, but for those of you who don't, when I use the word toxic to refer to social behavior, I'm not overusing it or misusing it like a lot of people do. For me, toxic is one of the worst insults I could give to something on a social level. So, if it's really necessary to be that toxic for you to enjoy yourself, maybe there's a problem with you. Just a thought. Anyways, that was the first complaint. The second complaint was with the money that Prevent Cancer Foundation itself actually, and how that money is distributed. Now, I haven't done a deep dive on the books of Prevent Cancer Foundation for about 2 years at this point. I think was the last time I did it. So this is only speaking from 2 years ago to you know, like 2010, or actually, God, now that I think about it, actually, I think the first time I really started supporting Prevent Cancer Foundation would be, you know, I'm not even sure. It was long before Games Done Quick ever showed up or existed. Mostly because of Pico. Thank you, Pico. I never asked for those, but I still appreciate them. Thank you very much for your continued support. Thank you. The reasoning being that I'm just going to say this as bluntly as possible, because there's three big reasons why I support the Prevent Cancer Foundation. Reason number one, cancer isn't something that we can just cure. And it is, in my opinion, a legitimate wronghood that too many people have the mentality of curing cancer. Now, we can reach, and now I know this is getting into technically range, so please let me try and explain myself here. It is possible to reach a point where we can prevent cancer or deal with cancer appropriately and quickly enough to the point where it is no longer an issue to the scale and scope that it has been for the last billion years at this point. But cancer itself isn't really a disease. It's basically just a form of genetic mutation, right? Like, it's a, as weird as it's going to sound, it's actually a natural, it is a natural byproduct of converging factors of living on a planet that's baked in radiation and has God knows how many other things that go into our bodies every day, right? Yeah, exactly. There's the cure for cancer. It doesn't exist. It's not even a concept. Now, my reason for being so upset about this is because, first of all, some people are basically scam artists by going, you know, how many charities have you seen that are all about curing cancer, right? Because those charities, I'm only speaking of a few in specific. I'm not going to name names. I don't want to call out specific charities here. But there are a few specific charities that are basically straight up scams because they're just, yeah, let's cure cancer. And I can think of at least one right off the top of my head which was used as a tax dump and nothing else for about 4 years or so before they finally shut down. Goddamn worthless piece of crap. I mean, it's just... The second reason I'm upset about this, and I'm sure there's a terminology for this, I don't have my own, but it's the idea that if all the attention is on the wrong thing, the right thing might not be fixed. Right? You know the concept I'm talking about, right? Like, if too many people think cancer is something that should be cured, if too many people think that curing cancer is the goal, there might not be enough people who are working on actually solving the cancer problem. Make sense? So, anyways, that's one of the reasons why the Prevent Cancer Foundation is the kind of thing that I, at least from a philosophical level, am more in favor of. Because the Prevent Cancer Foundation is about early detection and prevention. Because, interestingly enough, and I forget the exact statistics off the top of my head, so please forgive me, we have the ability to deal with the vast majority of cancer now. Like, at our current stage of medical technology and resource and development. If we catch it quickly enough. Like, if I walked out and was like, hey, and someone's like, oh my god, we've just detected you have cancer. There's an extremely high chance they could fix that. And the earlier you catch it, the greater the success chance. Now, there are other factors involved. I live in the States, so that would cost me an arm and a leg, but, you know, point remaining, right? I also agree, cancer... I can't believe I'm saying this, but this is an actual legitimate statement. Cancer is a sexy disease. What I mean by that is cancer is something that is, this is such a weird statement to say, but it's true, is a more attractive thing to go after. You know, everybody knows what cancer is, and everybody knows that cancer's bad. So, you know, death to cancer. Glorified, that's not a bad way to put it, but the actual term, again, this is not me making up this term, the actual term for this is it is a sexy disease. It is something that gets lots of attention, and it's very popular to try and, you know, be, I'm against cancer, or we're trying to fight cancer, and blah, blah, blah. HIV was a very sexy disease for a while ago. It's varied, depending on the time. Anyways, funnily enough, by the way, I actually still like, I love this. South Park just keeps giving me material. I still think South Park did explain cancer probably the best. Cancer is just a stupid, malicious little lump that is going to try and beat you, and you can't let it. Fun fact, so I've said for many years that I don't actually know anyone personally who's dealt with cancer or is a cancer survivor. That's not true anymore. My stepmother had cancer, breast cancer specifically, and she did survive. Obviously, she's still alive. She did endure it because they caught it pretty early. You're kind of noticing a trend here. That she did have to undergo surgery, obviously, because that's kind of how you deal with cancer. And she is doing pretty good. She hasn't had a relapse since then. This is actually a little over 2 years ago. Or no, excuse me, a little over a year ago. Sorry. Just pointing that out. Anyways, God, I'm getting way off topic here. So, I am a supporter of the Prevent Cancer Foundation. One of the other complaints that I've heard is that the Prevent Cancer Foundation mismanages its money. Now, this is a much more difficult thing to really talk about, but, hey Brendan, as of a couple of years ago, which is the last time I really started looking at their books, and it's actually, I think it's been 3 years now at this point, but I think that most of the people, and this is just my opinion, I even saw someone else this week talk about this, most of the people who look at the Prevent Cancer Foundation's budget are idiots who don't understand how budgets work. Now, let me explain this. The Prevent Cancer Foundation pays its employees and pays for events to generate things, you know, administration, marketing, that kind of thing. Oh, I'm done. That's it. That's what people yell about. Now, whether that is a valid complaint or not, I guess that's up to you to decide. I guess that's up to the individual to decide, because some people consider that to be mismanagement of funds, that those people, that all of the money that actually goes into the bucket of the Prevent Cancer Foundation should actually go specifically to, you know, dealing with whatever. But you see, I've never heard that complaint, Recordy. Not once. And I went looking this week. I've just seen people complain about the fact that they pay their people at all. Like, I will never forget this one. This one pissed me off, actually. This is a few years ago. There were a few people who were threatening to pull all support, and, you know, obviously this is stupid, but basically a lot of people were really up in arms over the fact that Mike Oyama got something like, I think it was $20,000 a year for doing his work with the GDQs. Now, that probably sounds like a decent chunk of change. I don't know about you guys, but $20,000 a year is not a lot of money. In fact, that's actually below the poverty line. That's less than I make, and I can't afford to live on my own. And people were complaining. In fact, I'm going to pull a direct quote because I looked this up, about the cushy paycheck that Mike Oyama is being received for this. I mean, Jesus Christ. Now, again, I haven't actually sat down and looked at the books regularly, so I can't comment nowadays. But that's still, again, speaking here in the States, again, I have no idea what PCF is doing elsewise. But I think this is just another aspect of outrage culture. I'm just going to summarize all my thoughts. I guess it just irritates me, guys. Outrage culture irritates me in general, but this is deliberate misinformation at this point. This is basically slant. $1,600 a month? No! I literally could not survive. Hang on. Let me think up my mental. So, okay. I just realized something, Anthony, and I bet it's the same thing that some of you guys don't understand about my wages too. No offense. Because some of you probably look at my Patreon and say, oh man, he makes, you know, $2,000 a month. That's a lot of money. That's gross. I don't mean it's unpleasant. I mean that's gross income. Okay? I have to pay taxes out of that $2,000 a month. Just like Mike Oyama has to pay taxes out of his $1,600 a month. That's not net. Most people, when they think of monthly income or, you know, weekly income, I've noticed this, and there's nothing wrong with this really, automatically mentally translate that to net, because most people get their paychecks as net, because most companies already take taxes out before they even pay you, right? But in Mike Oyama's case, and again, in my case, I have to pay that manually. It's one of the reasons why that $3,000 a month is what I actually need in order to really be able to survive on my own, to be able to actually have my own place and whatnot, is because of the fact that that $3,000 isn't just covering bills and existence. That also has to cover the increased amount of taxes that the increased income is going to pay. Make sense? Anyways, so Yeah. So getting back to my point, I also want to say that some of the complaints about the fact this is a specific complaint. This is great. There were some complaints about the fact that GDQ's I'm not even sure I want to talk about this actually. Basically that you know what? I've decided not to talk. I don't actually want to get into that. I've decided to skip that topic. Instead, I want to bring up another complaint I heard, just because this one amuses me. During one of the runs, this person apparently, this is going off of a Reddit thread, this person was, I couldn't even enjoy the run because of chat. For those of you not aware, you can turn off chat. I don't know if you're aware of that. But apparently for this person... I got nothing, guys. I got nothing. Are we the one? I'm sorry, it's getting really hard to concentrate. I know I've talked about the mismanagement of funds. I know I talked about the chat thing. Oh, yeah, I guess the other thing was how commercialized GDQ has become. So, okay. One of the things that I've heard a complaint about, which I've also heard a complaint about since about 2014, I think, is when these complaints first started, is that GDQ has become too commercialized. That it's become too big, basically. And so, as a result, it's not fun or enjoyable anymore. Now, usually when I hear these kind of complaints, it's usually said alongside a sentence that's something along the lines of, I remember when it was just a bunch of friends having fun speedrunning games together. Maybe we're just watching different GDQs, because I saw a whole lot of friends this last week who, you know, were having fun playing speedruns together. And I mean this sincerely, by the way. There were actually... yeah, it was basically the hipster argument. I'm sorry. Because there is a valid truth in the fact that it has become more commercialized. They have had to get more harsh with the rules. They've had to. And I want to stress this. I'm actually on GDQ's side at least about half the time when it comes to how much they've had to lock down on some of their policies. And you know why? Because it's no longer a thing where like 30 people attend. Literally hundreds of people go to these events. And I actually have a Lorean for this. It's called sample size theory. More people get involved, more bad. Very simple. You know, if 1% of a crowd is going to be unpleasant or is going to try and break something or is going to say something that they shouldn't or whatever, that 1% increases in terms of people, the greater the pie is. I mean, this is just basic math at this point. Also, this GDQ is imperfect. Sorry. So while it is a valid statement to say that GDQ is becoming more commercialized, I don't think it's a valid complaint, personally. My opinion. I think that complaining about that is kind of silly. Now, I do disagree with some of the things they've done, but then again, at the same time, I kind of don't with some of the others. Let me bring up probably the most infamous example. Bonesaw. Everyone knows about the Bonesaw incident, right? It's like the first thing everyone brings up when it comes to GDQ drama, right? Everyone brings up Bonesaw. So here's the thing. Bonesaw was running a game. I don't even remember the game. And he was basically just joking and laughing and carousing the entire time. He was temporarily, it's worth noting, banned as a consequence of that. Now, what most people say when they look at that is they say, why would they ban this? It was thank you, Jack and Daxter. It was funny. It was enjoyable. There was great atmosphere. Why would you ban him for that? So there are actually two major reasons why they banned him for this. And yes, I bothered to look into this because I was curious, and I follow the GDQ somewhat closely. The first and most important... I guess there's actually three reasons now that I'm thinking about it. The first and most important reason that he was temp banned for this is because of the fact that he was asked to stop because he kind of was going a little bit overboard, especially with regards to volume and cussing, multiple times, and ignored the requests to rein it in a little bit. In other words, when... And I'm sorry, I hate to say this, but I'm kind of with GDQ on this. If I actually said... If I had Roximus on my show and Rox just was like, blah, 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 and I'm like, could you pull it down a bit? And he just flat ignored me repeatedly, we'd have an issue. Second thing was the Twitter thing. I'm not going to go completely into the Twitter thing, but all I'm going to say is that he shouldn't have done that. And I'm just... yeah. And the third reason is the cussing. He deserved that ban, I'm sorry. That is my opinion. I would be completely okay with it in this case. You say that, Requery, but I don't know if I agree on that one, because I've seen Bonesaw several times, actually, both at GDQ and off GDQ, and he was certainly in a certain form there, but it is my opinion that he did cross the line 3 times. Make of that what you will. I have no idea about any bans this year. Now, I don't agree with all of their bans, it's worth noting. I also haven't looked into all of the specific examples and specifics of bans. There was one individual who is literally makes a career out of being a troll. I'm not even going to name him. Doesn't even friggin' matter. And, yeah, Bones also conceded that as well. I'm pretty sure. I shouldn't say that. I'm not 100% about that. There was an individual who was basically being trolly, who was then banned for being trolly, and then used it to try and troll them and to try and generate artificial drama in order to get them some more views. I am specifically avoiding naming names because they don't deserve those views. Now, again, I don't agree with all of their bans and all of their lockdowns. In fact, I was one of those people who, I think it was 2015. It was 2015 or 2016. I felt they cracked down on the rules too far. But it's also worth noting that in that same event, they also lifted those rules a bit. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is that it depends on the circumstances. I guess that's the same thing I say about everything. God, I didn't eat breakfast. I just realized that. Anyways, I don't have anything else to really say about GDQ. I liked GDQ 2018. I'm going to continue to support it. I am going to continue to... I'm looking forward to SGDQ 2018. Yay. God, I'm really out of it. I'm sorry, guys. I just talked for 30 minutes about GDQ. Let's talk about marketing. Yeah, that sounds like a good thing to talk about. I love talking about marketing. Ah, yes. That's actually one of the incidents I was thinking about, Gary. So marketing, right? If I was interested... Oh, right, change topic. God damn it, I hate this topic thing. Why'd you guys make me do this topic thing? You're terrible. No, Preacher, I have no idea about it. Also, I have nothing to say about it, but... Never heard about it. You're insane and crazy, sir. There we go. There's a lot of different schools of marketing, And yeah, I know, right, Zetzler? There's a lot of different schools of marketing, and it's gotten to the point
Your dedication will be rewarded.
It's gotten to the point where your dedication will be rewarded. I really wish you would stop doing that. Yeah, because I have the programming knowledge to do that, Lurker. I mean, that's not a bad idea, but custom plugins are a little out of my scope right now. Thank you, Lord of Mordor. And I'll put that towards something. Go look at the site. There's a bunch of stuff you can put that towards. Anyways, marketing. As of about 1990, I'd say 6 or 5, somewhere along there, marketing kind of solidified. What I mean by that is there hasn't really been a lot of new marketing concepts since then. There's been basically one, and even that was just a variance on pre-existing concepts. So there's not really like a correct way to do marketing, and there's not really an incorrect way to do marketing, because I feel like I'm repeating myself here. It depends on the circumstances. It depends on what you're plugging, what your potential audience is, what your previous audience is, et cetera, right? So you got to actually think about that and actually sit down and put some real effort into it. Now, in my opinion, most people have no goddamn idea what they're doing with marketing, and they're stupid. That's just my opinion. I think, and I've said this many times, I think that people just burn way too much money on marketing, which isn't necessary. I point to bus ads, and then I move on. But one of the types of marketing that I find most interesting is the idea of the quiet marketing, where you don't have a big announcement, you don't have some huge thing, you don't spend tons of money on tons of people or lots of real estate. By real estate, I don't mean buying a house. Marketing real estate involves how much, like literally size of banners, or AdWords. That's a good example. Or being able to purchase like larger banner ads. There's different variances of sizes of banner ads. Magazine ads, I think that's still a thing. So, kind of, yeah, Clavier. Although you'd be surprised how often people seem to not think that's the case. Pardon me. But the quiet thing is basically just kind of being like, and just kind of sliding under the rug, and more or less relying... Oh my god, that's so sad. Do you know how much money that cost them, Preacher? I'll give you a hint. It's 7 digits. I guarantee you that's 7 digits. Minimum. Because I've looked into bus ads. I love Disney. So, you rely on your audience to basically spread the word by themselves. Now, that only... Again, it's not right. It's not correct. It only works in certain circumstances. But if you're a company who put out a silly popular game from a fairly popular series that was a breakout hit and haven't really done much since then, and have a new game you're working on which you have basically announced absolutely nothing about for years at this point, sliding that little thing under the rug is, in my opinion, a great marketing move. Like, oh, I don't know, for example, tweeting out the word beep. For those of you not aware, CD Projekt Red recently tweeted out from their official Cyberpunk Twitter account, just asterisk beep asterisk, which isn't the word beep. It's actually beep. It's supposed to be the onomatopoeia of the sound of beep. Now, there's two general things this could mean. Either this is just them kind of reminding everyone of the fact that Cyberpunk exists, or this is actually foreshadowing to a larger announcement. But either way, this was one of the best marketing moves I've seen in a long time. And this is actually funny because as much as I give a lot of praise to CD Projekt Red, they are not immune to the marketing problem. They spent a lot of money on Witcher 3's marketing campaign. Probably more than they should have. But yeah, you get my point. This is marketing right here. This is how you actually... God, I can't believe I'm saying this because this is so stupid and obvious, but you have to actually look at your situation, look at your audience, and say, how do I approach this? I know. Beep. Like, I have already had 3 separate requests this week, and a couple of questions, which I've already answered, but 3 separate requests to literally sit down and do a video talking about the beep. I mean, the amount of buzz being generated about it is crazy. Now, that's the intent. Now, here's the thing. If they don't do some kind of follow-through on this, then it will probably reach a little bit closer into the negative thing, like what Takoida's talking about here. You have to capitalize on this kind of marketing buzz. Again, there's a couple of ways they could do this. One, now, if they did this just to remind people that Cyberpunk existed, I would actually say that was a mistake. Like, if I was in the boardroom, you know, in my blazer, probably have a tie on, and they're like, okay, we need to do something to remind people of Cyberpunk. My first reaction would be, nope. And everyone would look at me, huh? Guys, we don't need to remind people we're working on Cyberpunk. The game's not coming out for 7 years, okay? Leave it be. But if instead this is a prelude to something else, well, that's a brilliant move. Because it generates tons and tons of rep, which will then build up to the actual announcement itself. But it has to pay off that existing thing. You can't tell me they did this unknowingly. And yeah, someone earlier, I don't remember who, I think Requery said, yeah, if Valve had tweeted the word 3, it's kind of the same level of impact this would have had. So, interesting. I knew that, Tigzar, but again, we'll see if they follow through. Because if they don't, then this was a mistake. The voting for Ruminations will end probably when the STO low run ends, Vandalia. Oh yeah, by the way, anybody who's a patron, make sure you vote. We are voting on the next cycle of Ruminations right now. Manually, you have to vote manually. It's the best way to keep everything nice and accurate. So, just a heads up for anybody who actually hasn't heard that. Anyways, don't vote Tetris. Tetris is terrible. Let's talk about the Nintendo Direct. By which I mean, let me type this up and then get a timestamp. My lower weeks are getting more complicated every week, guys. Alright, timestamp. I do so much of this stuff manually. I call myself a professional streamer, and I'm manually doing all this crap. I don't have any programs or other people doing this stuff for me. I need to be like some super rich person, so I just say, no, I'm talking about this, and there's like an intern over there who's like, okay, now he's talking about this. Let's talk about the Nintendo Direct that came out recently. Yeah, exactly. Lucky Gorilla. So, for those of you not aware, there was a Nintendo Direct, a mini Direct, actually, where they just showcased a bunch of stuff. I'm just going to kind of cover this super quick. I don't have a lot to say about most of this, because that's actually going to be in our next topic. So we've got Darkest Dungeon is coming out on the Switch, which is interesting. I'm not even sure what to make of that. Darkest Dungeon's coming out on the Switch. Dark Souls is coming out on the Switch. Dark Souls 1. Although it's coming with all the DLC, the Super Edition or whatever the hell it is. Ys 8 is coming out on the Switch. Hyrule Warriors is coming out on the Switch. Basically a new version, a final mix of The World Ends With You is coming out on the Switch. Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze is coming out on the Switch. We have a couple of new things here as well. Kirby Star Allies now has a release date of March 16th, excuse me. Dragon Quest Builders actually has an active demo right now on the Switch for anybody who wants to try that out, which, by the way, I recommend everyone do, because Dragon Quest Builders is actually a pretty good game. And they're continuing to produce more DLC for the Mario XCOM, Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle. which they talked about some additional stuff there, which I'm not super interested, at least not until they add some, more actual meat, but it's interesting. Oh yeah, Pokken is also getting some DLC as well. One moment. Anyways, all of this is expected, to be completely honest. The Switch is doing very well economically. Regardless of what you think of it personally or critically, the Switch has actively exploded economically. I would say that's unexpected, but it's actually completely expected. Here's the thing. For those of you who have been paying attention to Nintendo over the years, the NES was obviously very successful, and the SNES was very successful. But then the N64 started a trend, because the N64 sold like gangbusters, because it was the party console. Then the GameCube didn't sell that well at all. Again, I'm not talking critically, just purely economically. The GameCube didn't actually do all that well. Then the Wii absolutely exploded. Then the Wii U didn't do all that well. And now the Switch has actually exploded again. This is nothing new, is what I'm trying to say. I admit that I was very hesitant about the Switch. I will freely admit that. But the Switch exploding is not very surprising. What is also not very surprising... Yeah, no kidding, Max Time. And I'm not even talking about the handhelds, because every Nintendo handheld has been an incredibly bestseller. In fact, if you adjust for inflation, I believe the DS is actually still the best-selling console ever. But anyways, so the idea that the Switch is selling very, very well, not surprising. The fact that a bunch of companies are like, oh god, we need to get our games onto the Switch, not surprising. None of this is really new or interesting. But I do find it fascinating that there is a sufficient push for third-party development on the Switch right now. Not because it's Nintendo, not because Nintendo is super against third-party development, but because of the fact that apparently Nintendo has gone out of their way to make and I'm going to phrase this wrong because I'm really tired, I can't think of the right word right now, the making of games on our system to be a very smooth and user-friendly process. And I know user-friendly is actually the wrong phrase here. I guess developer-friendly is the way I want to phrase that. In other words, they are basically rolling out the welcome mat, figuratively speaking, and saying, here, really helping with the actual development, really helping with the API, really helping with the toolkit and figuring out how exactly to work with the hardware, all kind of stuff like that. And that's actually very funny to me, because that's the kind of thing that Nintendo actually started doing on the Wii U. It's just most people weren't interested in developing on the Wii U. But now that the Switch is doing very, very... Okay, apparently user-friendly was correct, whatever. Now that the Switch is doing very, very well, a lot more people are interested in it, and it's funny how many reports I keep seeing. Like, I've seen like 3 articles in the last month about how incredibly, user-friendly or whatever that developing for the Switch is, especially for the indie market. For people who just want to put out, little games or whatever. And I mean, God's sakes. So, I think it's kind of awesome that a company, regardless of whether it's Nintendo or Sony or Microsoft, that one of the companies is basically knocking it out of the park right now. Because that tends to be a win for us, the actual gamers. We get all sorts of awesome stuff on, well developed, hopefully, fingers crossed. So far, pretty much all of this... So far, all of the stuff that's being ported or developed on the Switch has been pretty high quality that I've seen. I haven't looked into all of it. But whatever, I'm with it. I am completely with it. I also want to... I want to mention that... Obviously, we were hoping for some real news from this Nintendo Direct, that Zelda rumor I mentioned for the 3DS, which is still a rumor, it's worth noting. The Metroid Prime news, news about the new Pokemon, you know. But this is Nintendo. For the most part, there have been exceptions to this, but for the most part, Nintendo doesn't really do a big announcement thing unless we're kind of ready to go. Again, I know there's exceptions to that. Cough, cough, Breath of the Wild. God. So, I would be very surprised if we don't get a Direct this year, which is, you know, actually telling us what the hell's going on with Prime and what the hell's going on with Pokemon. Now, I also want to just comment on something else really quick. I actually said this in chat over the week during GDQ. Nintendo is so hard to predict. Like, seriously. Most companies are very understandable, whether I agree with them or not, right? Like, for example, there is a company called... actually, I forget that I think it's Warner Brothers Interactive is the specific name, but it's the Warner Brothers video game label. They're very predictable. Everything they say just makes perfect sense. It's evil and horrible and stupid, but it's completely understandable, right? EA, right? It's super easy to understand what EA is thinking and why they do things, right? But then you look at Nintendo and it's like, what are you doing? It's so difficult to predict Nintendo because they just kind of... And for every time that Nintendo does something that makes me go, yeah, they also do something that makes me go, what are you... Oh, why are you doing this? It's actually difficult to call myself a Nintendo fan as of this point because it's like... Huh? Yeah, very few companies are legitimately unpredictable. It's just weird to talk about. But anyways, but the other thing I wanted to talk about that this Nintendo Direct came up, and I did actually talk about this during GDQ. Is this. Now, this is actually a complicated topic, so I hope my throat lasts. You know, I notice I'm getting croakier the longer I talk here. You can tell I'm not fully recovered here. Sigh. Now, yeah, exactly, max time. Sometimes like, yeah. One of the things, yeah, no kidding, record. One of the things that is actually a really, really complicated topic, and it's a very difficult topic. It's one of those no right answer topics. Is the contrast, the battle between new IPs and porting old properties. Okay. Now I want to stress this has nothing to do with movies. Movies are a completely different animal when it comes to this. Okay. Movies have their own problems in a completely other category of, you know, hey, we're going to be going ahead and bringing back this other old movie, but it's going to be a new movie. And then there's this other old movie property that we're turning into a new movie. That's a whole other ball of wax. Let's not get into that. Just when it comes to video games. Now, let me go ahead and talk out the obvious stuff. Let's just get that out of the way. First of all, new IPs... This is a new IP right here. Up, it was heads. So that was actually a good new IP. Woo! Hang on. That was actually Tails. I was gonna laugh if I was heads again. But the second new IP is Tails. It's bad. A new IP is a risk, in other words. That is, again, we're just talking about the obvious stuff. New IPs are risk, but new IPs are good. I shouldn't have to make this point, but all I'm going to say is Horizon Zero Dawn. You know, I think that is a very easy, understandable example of new IP good. Let's talk about the ports thing. So, if I wanted to play, let's throw emulation out the window for just a second. Let's not even talk about emulation. Let's say I wanted to sit down and play Yeah, Cuphead, that's another good example. I wanted to sit down and play... Okay, this is actually a bad example, but just hear me out, okay? I wanted to sit down and play... Fear. Thank you very much. Malsinitin? God, I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I'm barely with it right now. Final Fantasy 1. Screw it. I'm gonna stop trying it. Now, I know FF1 has been ported a few thousand times, but just bear with me because I can't think of a better example right now. Imagine for a moment that FF1 was only ever on the NES, okay? That it never got the PS1 port, or the GBA port, or the PSP port, or the... I don't remember the name of the console port, or the phone port. Just imagine it's just on the NES. Now, I own FF1 on the NES. It's in my deep storage, right over there, in my closet. Someday I hope to actually have the display case set up for my older arcade games like that. So if I wanted to go replay FF1 right now, that would be a mess for me. I'd have to dig out my NES. Like, okay, I'd have to have my actual NES. I'd have to have my actual cartridge. They would have to work. I'd have to figure out some way to get those old cables to hook up to some kind of modern thing. So I basically have to have an adapter box in order to make this work. And the, I mean, I've talked about this before, and this is kind of delving into that emulation thing again, but there's actually a pretty good chance that the battery on that would eventually die out, right? In fact, I know Pax. His copy of Earthbound's battery has died. He cannot save on his physical copy of Earthbound, which is a SNES game. I'm actually almost 100% certain that my copy of FF1's battery has died as of this point. It's physical media. And it was physical media made in an era where they weren't really thinking about doing that. That's true, I could replace the battery. So I could pull out the NES, pull out the cartridge, get the adapter, and then replace the battery. Physically open the thing up and do frickin' electric surgery. This is a long and significant process to play FF1. So this is the first, and again, we're still in obvious land, this is the first big benefit of ports. The second big benefit is, let's say I've never played FF1, and I do know people who have never played a lot of the older NES, SNES, N64, etc. games, right? So, let's say that someone new wanted to play FF1. Now again, pretend for a moment FF1 was never ported. So someone who wanted to play FF1, who has never played FF1, will have to go and actually buy the cartridge, buy the NES, and then go through everything I just talked about in order to make that happen. And yeah, and then of course, even people who never played them, who are at the same age range, then there's also the next generation. I mean, I'm not exactly that old. I'm only 35 and a half. But there is an entire group of people who are about 10 to 15 years younger than me who have basically not gotten to experience some of these games and who either could and might enjoy them or actively want to. So this is why porting old IPs is good. Whoops. Let me just destroy my own computer here. Is good, right? If I'm not making my point clearly already, I think what I'm really trying to say is that I think that we should have new IPs and we should have ports of old games. I'm just going to summarize my opinion right there. Bam. Now, I mention this because I've actually had several people comment on the fact that I seem to be a little bit too in favor of ports or proper remakes, and I've had some people say that I don't really give new IPs a lot of attention, and that's true, I do tend to do that, that's my fault, but I do actually want new IPs as much as I want ports of old console, ports of old stuff. I want both. I want both equally. I think both are an excellent thing for gaming, as a culture. Never mind as a medium of entertainment. Now, pardon me one moment, as my throat slowly gives out on me. The problem comes from specific things. So this is just a generic topic. We're still just kind of covering the generics of this overall topic. let's talk about the Switch, okay? Now, I'm going to admit something. It's going to make you guys laugh at me. Okay, here's my Switch right here, right? I'm not as young as I used to be. I have back pains regularly. My back hurts right now. I have finger pains. My elbows get sore, and my shoulders get sore if I have to sit in one position for too long. Let me give you an example. When I do those Pokemon streams, when I've got the 3DS, you know, sitting here, I basically have to sit here like this. That's one of the reasons I got that extended cable, so that I can actually try and relax my back a little bit while playing. Because I know this is such a pedantic complaint, but it does cause me physical pain to play certain video games in certain ways. But not on this. I know that some people have said, you know, I don't get the mobile thing. Why do you care that a game is mobile? It's not just the fact that this is mobile. The 3DS is mobile. But the 3DS hurts if I play it under certain circumstances. This doesn't. I can play this. This isn't mobility. This is accessibility. I could play this like this. I could play this like this. I could play this like this. I could play this while exercising. I have actually played my Switch on my exercise thing. I put the screen right there and there, and I've got my hands on the actual things. I've played the Switch while freaking exercising. I can play the Switch while going to sleep. I can play the Switch sitting here. I can plug it into my TV. I can plug it into my monitor. I can actually have the controller for it, which is also wireless, you know. The accessibility of the Switch is a huge thing to me. And I have to be honest, it probably wouldn't be as big of a deal for me if this was 10 years ago. Oh yeah, that's another thing. Streaming 3DS games requires that capture card. You know what streaming this costs me? Nothing. It's an HDMI out. That comes with it. This is huge. So let me make this clear. I am hugely in favor of basically everything getting ported to the Switch, but I kind of want to explain why. It's not just the fact that it's awesome now. I'm thinking about the next 5, 10, God, maybe even 20 years at this point. Imagine years and years from now when... I mean, I don't know what Nintendo's next console will be like. I don't know what Sony's next console will be like. But I can guarantee right now that I could still keep playing this. Oh, I do too, Requiem. I could still keep playing this years from now. And that's why I want as many things ported to it as possible. Because if I sit down... So this specifically came up. We were talking about this in chat during GDQ. This specifically came up with regards to Wii U games. Now, I love a lot of Wii U games. There's like 30 or so Wii U games that I really, really love. And I was like, yes, I absolutely want Wii U games on the Switch. And a lot of people in chat brought up the very valid point that that's going to take time and attention and money and development and people away from making new stuff on the Switch. That's a valid statement. Because the Wii U... Every individual Wii U game is going to take separate time and effort to port onto the Switch, because the literal hardware functionality is different, right? Like, they have to solve what they're going to do with the pad. They have to solve what they're going to do with the two screens problem. You know, they have to figure out all this stuff. They have done this. I remind you that we've already gotten like 3, I think, Wii U games on the Switch, and we're getting Donkey Kong. I might have the number wrong, but you know, they're already porting Wii U games to the Switch, so this is something they're already doing. But that does take time and development. And if I'm being honest, I'm not sure which I think is better at that point. Like, if I would rather they work on new IPs on the Switch or port Wii U stuff onto the Switch. But there's an easier answer here, and that easier answer is called the SNES. Hear me out. For those of you not aware, they have already basically perfected the... yeah, that's true, Gallade. And that's true, Nintendo doesn't have to do the porting. So if they could actually perfect a system or a method of doing this, or outsource the porting, that would be awesome. But I digress. The SNES they've basically already perfected the SNES emulator on the 3DS XL. It works phenomenally. They actually have the pixel ratio thing, and they've got, it is basically as close to a perfect SNES emulator that we have, not counting some of the actual SNES emulators out there. And that's really, really easy to put on the Switch. I mean, once there, done, it would probably take maybe a month at the absolute outside to get the SNES emulator that Nintendo owns and has already put on their 3DS onto the Switch. That's really highballing it. God's sakes, think about how much of a market that would explode if they managed to do that. Because unlike the Wii U argument, this is something that wouldn't take a lot of time or effort. Most of the actual involvement from the development side would be specifically going after, yeah, I know, right? Would be going after the right, basically, to getting the legal right to putting SNES games onto the Switch. And I think that would be kind of awesome. Now, Nintendo's got a Nintendo. In fact, I was actually going to do that. I completely forgot. I don't even know where my 3DS is right now. Part of the problem with this is, of course, the idea that... Okay, let me share something that Gary said, because I've actually had this exact same mindset. There have been a few times where I've pulled up my 3DS and gone to the store, and I've seen several SNES games that I'd kind of like to have in a portable format on my 3DS. And I've looked through the list, and then I've looked at their prices, and then I've closed the store. Because Nintendo overcharges for its virtual stuff, for its emulated stuff. They are way too expensive. I'm sorry. I mean, granted, I'm not the most financially well-off person in the world, so maybe I'm a little bit biased here, but they charge way too damn much for their games. My opinion. But I do have to admit that even if those same prices were still on the Switch, I would buy them. I would just parse it out a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, maybe once every other month kind of a thing. Like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and drop some money on getting Earthbound on the Switch. I'm going to drop some money on getting Super Metroid on the Switch, right? Because, again, the accessibility of this is huge to me. And being able to play my SNES games in this format would be a huge deal to me. Also, NES games, while I'm on the subject. I also wouldn't mind N64 games, GameCube games, Wii games, PC games, and every game. But that's getting into ridiculous land. We're talking here. We're talking into the land of realism, not the land of make-believe. Yeah, I know, right, Probe? I mean, it's all possible, but you get my point. Like, the realisticness of all this stuff getting ported to the Switch is debatable. What in the world? I'm sorry, one moment. I mean, you gotta keep in mind, guys, right now we don't even have a virtual store at all. Like, we have, what, like 2 arcade games on the Switch right now? Now... this gets back into... this is actually one of the reasons why I brought up that whole... it's one of the reasons I brought up that whole unpredictable thing earlier. Because if Nintendo were virtually any other company, I could probably predict what they're going to be doing with the Switch. And in fact, let's go ahead and be honest with ourselves for a moment. Statistically speaking, like, ignoring the Nintendo factor, the random stuff they do, Right now, the most likely reason why we have no virtual store on the Switch and nothing at all for that is because they're building up to a massive release, right? I mean, that's just plain logic at this point. They haven't even really talked about the virtual store on the Switch, other than the fact that it'll probably happen. It would be a classic marketing move to go ahead and say, all right, we're going to do some virtual store on the Switch. And then months of silence. Actually, I think at this point we're in the year range of silence. And then, all right, here's 50 SNES games and it's 80 NES games and 10 N64 games on the Switch. Bam! And that would be awesome. And it would sell like crazy. You know it would. You know that would sell like crazy. But this is Nintendo. So I have no idea what they're doing. They could just as easily be like, oh, right. I forgot. We have the Switch. Yeah, they could... Sega. I mean, God's sakes, Nintendo's been close with Sega for how long now? Nintendo could easily be like, hey, let's get some Genesis stuff, some Mega Drive stuff, some Sega CD stuff, you know? Will they? Oh. Nintendo. I don't even know how to predict these people. God, you frustrate the crap out of me, Nintendo. And you know, if I could share one last thing, this is also mentioned during chat. This right here isn't really that innovative. What this is... Oh, hey, you can kind of see yourselves there. Where's the... Ah, it's me! Anyways, this isn't actually that innovative. I know that sounds weird. So we've got the central tablet console thing. That's not new. We've got the detachable wireless controller. That's not new at all. And we've got the HDMI output, which is definitely not new. The only really thing that they did that was actually new with this was the fact that they've got the two things separate, and the fact that they basically bundled all of the console ideas from the handheld generations and from the modern generation, or the standard generations, into one thing. And it worked. I still think this is luck, by the way, if I could just be completely blunt. I still think that the Switch basically lucked out on being awesome. Yeah, exactly, Julito. Yeah, Iwata was amazing. Let me just go ahead and say Iwata was fantastic. It is so rare that I could point to a suit. I can't even call him that. That's an insult. He wasn't a suit. It's so rare I could point to an executive and say, that person has my support. It is a damn rare thing. Iwata was an amazing person, and goddamn, the world is worse for his loss. Anyways, what GameCube games would I want to see on the Switch? Gosh, let's go with some of the biggies. Paper Mario 2, Metroid Prime 2, Mario Sunshine, both of the Rogue Squadrons. Oh, gosh. My brain is barely here. Monkey Ball. Let's get Monkey Ball on there. Yeah, Scars of Arcadia. Melee. Duh. I mean, Smash is such an obvious answer. I shouldn't even have to say that one. Yeah, having Metroid Prime on the Switch would be amazing. Oh yes, Metal Gear Solid. Someone actually in chat mentioned that earlier, but yeah, let's get freaking Metal Gear Solid on the Switch. Let's do it. I mean, God's sakes. Yeah, hang on. Let me just pull up a list of GameCube games. Let's just go down the list. All of these. Luigi's Mansion. Yep. Oh yeah, Wind Waker. Duh. Although I'd actually want the Wii U version of that ported, but whatever. Mario Kart Double Dash, which for the longest time was actually my favorite Mario Kart. Resident Evil 4. I'd totally be down with that. Twilight Princess. Again, Wii U version. F-Zero GX. If you have not seen F-Zero GX, it is a stupidly ridiculous game that is also very difficult and kind of totally awesome. Eternal Darkness, not a fan myself, but definitely should get ported over. Tales of Symphonia, and basically all the Tales of games. Beautiful Joe is one of those weird games that I think is kind of swept under the rug for the most part, but is a game that absolutely deserves to be played at least once if you have a chance for it. The Pikmin games, sure, I guess. I'm actually not a huge Pikmin fan, but I'm still with it. Fire Emblem, Path of Radiance. Kirby Air Ride, I'd be okay with that. Pokemon Coliseum. Apparently Resident Evil 0 was on the GameCube. Go figure. So there you go, we got another Resident Evil. Beyond Good and Evil. I don't know that one. Okay, here's a weird one for you. I know some people will disagree with me on this, and that's totally cool, but I would love to have Star Fox Adventures too. I mean, you're down in priority a little bit, but I actually friggin' like Star Fox Adventures. Sue me. Also, Animal Crossing, the first Animal Crossing. I don't remember that. Although I'd kind of rather they have a new Animal Crossing, but you know, whatever. Mario Party. I mean, let's be honest. The Switch is basically custom tailored for that kind of multiplayer stuff. Ah, yes, Star Fox Assault. I also like Star Fox Assault. It's a fun game to play, and its story is ridiculously cheesy. That's right. I actually couldn't remember which Sonic games were on the GameCube. Apparently Prince of Persia was on the GameCube. I didn't actually know that. I thought it was PS2 only. That can't be right. Hang on, let me double check that. Oh, no, that was actually on the GameCube. Holy crap. Didn't know that. Anyways. Yeah, I already mentioned Paper Mario. Paper Mario 2 is one of my favorite games of all time, so... So, Zawan asked earlier, what do I think the lifespan of the Switch is going to be? Now, I can tell you what my lifespan for this thing... I plan to use this thing for years and years, especially if they start porting stuff to it. But actual lifespan of the Switch, given the way that the gaming market has kind of shifted in recent years, I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, I could go ahead and, you know, put money down right now as saying that in a couple of years, probably I'd say 2 years from now, that's my prediction, we're going to get, like, I don't know what they'll call it, a Switch Pro, basically. You know, new hardware, new upgrades, same basic style and development. Kind of like we've already seen with well, everything, actually, now that I think about it, with regards to their handheld side. Because if you remember, there was the Game Boy, then there was the Game Boy Color, and then there was the Game Boy Advance, and then there was the Game Boy SP, which is actually a better advance, and then there was the DS, and then there was the DS... There's actually 3 versions of the DS, and I forget what they're called. There's the DS Lite and the DS, and there's like something else, I forget what it is. And then we have the 3DS, the 3DS XL, the new 3DS, and the new 3DS XL. I think that's everything. Oh, and the 2DS. Sorry. And also the new 2DS. That's what I'm thinking is going to happen with this. A port and a remake are completely different things. A port is... the DSi XL, that's the other one I was thinking of. I knew there was another one. A port... Give me just a moment. This is a port. A remake is something that actually remakes the game with the intention of making it better. Port is just taking something and putting it onto a new platform. Now, there is a difference between a bad port and a good port. That one I just showcased, FF6 on the phone, that's a bad port. I would not recommend that to literally anyone, unless you like have no other way to get a hold of that game, because it is a lazy, bad port. Oh god, we're back on topic, guys. But a remake is when you take something and try to add something to it, or change it, or polish it, or whatever. And then, of course, you all know what a proper remake is. I shouldn't have to explain that. Probably is the one, in all honesty. I mean, we'll see, I guess. That didn't actually happen with the 3DS, though. Like, I was one of those people who predicted that we would have a problem with the new 3DS, where, oh my god, you'd have to go ahead, you'd have to buy the new 3DS to play all the games that require it. And there's, what, 3 total? So maybe that won't happen. I don't know. Frickin' Nintendo. I don't know how to predict them. What are you going to do? Anyways, I do want to ask you guys a question. I'm sorry, I've been rambling all over the place today. One big question for you guys. If you... Yeah, exactly, Dakota. If you had a choice between focusing development and resources on new IPs, focusing development and resources on ports, or mixing between the two, which would you prefer? I've already given my opinion. I'd want a mix of both. I want both. I think the benefits of a good port and the benefits of new IP are obvious as I started this. And someone actually brought this up in chat. I think it was Sonic Doctor. Forgive me, but it's also worth noting that from an economic perspective, a port is always going to be safer money. Not necessarily better money, but safer, because you can generally predict what's going to happen with a port, or a remake for that matter. New IP? Who freaking knows? Like Horizon Zero Dawn, and I'm actually very grateful about this, sold like crazy. So there's a pretty good chance we're going to get some more Horizon Zero Dawn in the future. Horizon 1 Dawn, maybe? I don't know. Anyways. Yeah, Terranigma being ported would be awesome. That's a good question, Pretzel. I don't know, is my answer to that. Ocarina of Time... Ocarina? And Majora's Mask on the 3DS were good ports, or basic remakes. The line blurs a little bit, but they were not proper remakes, and they were not bad ports. Look, I'm just saying that I think we have enough Skyrim in our lives already. We don't need more. Zero mid-morning. There we go. It's also worth noting that from both a creative... This is one of those things that's so dumb. I'm surprised more companies don't look into this, especially in the movie industry. If you focus too much... None, Little Billy. If you focus too much on... just porting old IPs, or you focus too much on new IPs, both of those things tend to be bad from a long-term economic and creative perspective. Now, you might ask, how could not focusing on ports be a bad thing long-term? 2 reasons. First of all, there is always going to be a market for people who want old ports, and people who don't have those needs satisfied are going to be upset. Not just people who, like me, or like you guys, want to play older games, but also for the nostalgia crowd. Then there's the fact that the longer... This is a really messed up one right here. The longer you wait to port something, the more difficult it will be, until it might get to the point, might get to the point where it's no longer functionally possible to actually port an old IP. This is especially true in video gaming. I mean, do I need to bring up Homeworld Cataclysm again? Also, obviously, I shouldn't even have to say this, but obviously I'm in favor of everything being on the PC. No PC Master Race stupidity here. Stuff being on the PC basically gives it a shelf life of forever, as long as people have a brain about it. Because it's on the PC now. It is as soon as it is digital media, The moment it becomes digital media on the PC in a nice, usable format, bam, we have the method by which to sustain that game forever. So from literally just purely a historical perspective, stuff getting ported to the PC is awesome. My opinion. I don't actually agree with that, Gallade, but I've given my opinion on that one before. Yeah, I mean, I could go play Atari games right now because they're on the PC. To name an example of what I'm talking about. I don't know where I could get some VIC-20 games, but, Yeah, Skies of Arcadia would be nice, wouldn't it? The problem, of course, is that everything getting ported to the PC is not happening. Like, ever. There are simply too many factors getting in the way of that. Most of the actual porting to PC or sustaining things... Oh, there you go. Most of the actual sustaining stuff on the PC thing is being done by people, not by companies. And, again, I don't like to talk about emulation on my show because emulation is one of those topics that's like, oh god, don't talk about it. The simple fact of the matter is, if nothing else, emulation helps preserve history. There are actual people out there who... There's literally a museum in Seattle, I want to say. It's in Washington. Or maybe it's in Oregon. God, you know what? I can't actually remember. It's the Northwest U.S. There's a frickin'... See, and I talked about this recently, who actually goes out of their way to get copies of stuff, either in emulated format or otherwise, specifically to preserve them. Not to steal the property, not to pirate or whatever, but solely for the sake of actually maintaining copies of older Fear. Thank you, Shadow Machine, as ever, for that continued support. Can you believe it's been 7 months? So, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I say I want everything on PC. I mean, it would be nice to have the accessibility. PC is one of the easiest to access gaming consoles that exists, and of course, there's mod possibilities, and there's cheat engine possibilities, and of course, everything else, but the fact that I could go play... Yeah, exactly is the one. The fact that I could go play Final Fantasy I, the NES version of Final Fantasy I, on my PC right now, is one of the... I mean, honestly, that makes my point. I really don't feel like I need to say anything else. I don't want to play the NES version, because the NES version kind of sucks. But it has been preserved for history on the PC. Yeah, crypto mining. I'm not even going to talk about that. Time. No, I don't actually want to play FF6 on the phone. Wait, I agree. I'm one of those really weird people who, with exceptionally few exceptions, thinks that we should actually, retain history, basically. Like, we shouldn't just erase things. I've actually heard people talk about the opposite, and that's just something that I find bizarre. Like, I've heard people, this is not a joke, I've heard people legitimately say that, and this was actually specifically with regards to Dragon Quest I was the game, or Dragon Warrior on the NES, right? And I can't think of any right now, Prog. I say that to cover my tracks. That it would be totally cool, and in fact even better, if that version of the game was erased out of history, because the remake is just superior in every way. And the same could be said of FF1. I mean, the PS1 port, FF Origins, is superior in every way to the NES version, right? And then they've got the GBA version, and then they got the PSP version. So let's just erase the NES version. But again, why would you ever want to do that? I guess I just don't have the mindset to understand that. Maybe I'm weird. And of course, what's funny, and I'm going to finally tie this in here, back to our original topic, and not this topic, the topic we started today with, I can give you exactly one cohesive answer for why that shouldn't be. Because, funnily enough, we actually saw a Dragon Warriors game, NES copy, speedran over the previous week. It was one of the things at GDQ. Because plenty of people still specifically like speedrunning the older copies of the games. Because there's, you know, stuff you can do with the older copies of the game that you can't with the new one. Or maybe because you know the tricks of the older copy, or maybe because it's just more fun to you to do that. And yeah, it was actually a really good run. It was... I can't believe it. They actually made Dragon Warrior 1 enjoyable to watch. Holy crap. If we had erased that from history, we wouldn't have had that run. So what about objectively terrible games, the one? I don't know, case by case. But I can't really say that, for example, Ride to Hell Retribution should be erased, because it shouldn't. I mean... yeah, most speedrunners don't even patch games. It's another good example of that. Anyways, so I'm going to go ahead and... Yes?
You're fine. You're talking.
I'm going to have someone walk into my room and then look at me weird.
You stopped mid-sentence to turn and look.
Hi. My wonderful sister has decided to grace us for a moment.
We're going to the gym. She is on a movie, so you're fine.
Okay.
She knows to pop her head down here if she needs you.
Okay. Have fun.
She's watching a movie.
Don't kill your everything.
Today's the full-on fitness test where they make us see how much of shit we can do and how much we can. It's gonna suck.
Yeah, you're gonna be hurting tomorrow. Sorry. Hi, Son Kodak. Keep it all. She did look a little bit blurry. I've been having issues with my green screen lately, and I'm not sure why. I need to get like another stand or something for it. Anyways, so I'm gonna chop off the local recording, which is what I was about to say when she walked in. So